So everyone's talking about it. There's a brand new 4x4 on the way, but what exactly will be in store for us when we get our grubby hands on the new INEOS Grenadier? Welcome to Building the Grenadier. Over the next 12 months, I've been given exclusive access behind the scenes to find out exactly what the Grenadier will be and how it will be built, from the axles and chassis to the suspension, the powertrain and beyond. Fancy taking a look? Why not join me? INEOS say they're building the Grenadier using a classic 4x4 blueprint, so for them there was only one type of chassis to choose.
A ladder frame is the only way to build a proper off-road vehicle 4x4.
Ladder frames have been the basis for some of the most iconic off-roaders for over 70 years, starting with the Willys Jeep. So you could ask, why would INEOS use anything else?
We are not using a monocoque because we are not building an SUV.
Strong, stiff, rugged and reliable, ready for mud, sand, rock and snow, and ideal for attaching extra equipment like heavy-duty underbody protection or winches, and anything else you need in the field. Well, that's the plan. INEOS is creating the ladder frame in partnership with a highly experienced vehicle manufacturing company that has a proven pedigree of making ladder frames that can tackle the toughest environments. So the engineers are in no doubt at all. The Grenadier's skeleton will be a box section ladder frame. Now they'll happily give you a whole load of science and stats to explain why, but for mere mortals like us, the bottom line is absolutely clear. The ladder frame is super strong and a really well-proven 4x4 platform that over decades has helped aid organisations, conservationists, explorers, foresters and of course farmers work harder. For a 4x4 to get the job done, no matter how punishing the conditions, the Grenadier engineers feel that beam axles front and rear are essential.
Beam axle is the most robust design we can provide for this vehicle.
INEOS looked long and hard for the right supplier for the Grenadier's axles. They chose Carraro. Why? Because of their long history building tough four-wheel drive vehicles, including tractors, making them the perfect fit for the Grenadier. As you can imagine, there's been a whole lot of debate about whether the Grenadier should have independent suspension or beam axles. Now, both setups, of course, have their pros and cons, but on balance, the engineers have decided that beam axles are going to be more robust, less vulnerable to damage, and ultimately much more likely to keep you going when the going gets tough. Beam axles front and rear and a box section ladder frame. INEOS's vision for a no-compromise foundation to their ultimate 4x4. So the ambition is clear. They're starting with a blank sheet of paper. The Grenadier is being designed and built from the ground up. Every component chosen by engineers at the top of their game, and that's got to be very good news. Join me next time when I'll be trying to find out more about the suspension setup. The much talked about INEOS Grenadier is on its way, and I'm continuing my journey behind the scenes to find out exactly what the engineers are up to. INEOS has pulled together an international team of specialists to bring the Grenadier to life. There are around 60 companies already involved, and one of the key players is based here in Austria. Tractors, trucks, 4x4s, Magna has over a century of experience developing and building some of the world's toughest off-road vehicles. A good fit for this ambitious project. It feels like there's a bit of a Grenadier takeover here. There are around 100 engineers working on the project and 15 in this design office, focused on creating a suspension setup that meets the needs of people who use their 4x4s for work every day. People like Billy Milne, putting in the hard yards, looking after a large estate in the wilds of Scotland. The terrain is tough, punishing, challenging all year round. So Billy knows exactly what he wants.
An ideal 4x4 should be fit for purpose. It should be able to go where you want to put it, and it's got to have a good suspension system that rides through everything that's given. You want something basic, well set up, that does the job.
So there's a big expectation here. The best possible ground clearance, constant traction, and high axle articulation and suspension travel. So how are the engineers at Magna creating the ultimate 4x4 suspension? Well, by taking apart the world's most renowned off-roaders and benchmarking them, exploring 3 main options: leaf spring, coil spring or airbag, then using CAD to develop a theoretical new model that combines the best engineering ingredients to create something even better. And their conclusion? Well, there was only one way to go, it seems: coils and heavy-duty dampers. I met up with Magna engineer Matthias Mayer to find out more and to get an exclusive look inside their top-secret workshop. It's brilliant to see the suspension actually bolted to a chassis, and this is the Grenadier chassis now.
Yes, right. It's impressive.
It is really, really impressive. You've clearly gone with coil springs here. Why?
Coil spring is in our view the best option for this vehicle because we can have here a progressive spring curve.
This means the stiffness of the spring changes depending on the load. Add separate dampers and huge energy-absorbing bump stops, and the engineers believe they've created a unique package. So, underneath, 2 really hefty big bottom links, and then 2 slightly smaller top links.
That's right. This gives the stability against the rotation in this direction for brake torque and so on, and also good stability during the driving.
These 4 really strong links help stop the whole axle twisting or moving forwards and backwards. Back in the front then, we've got 1 link here, the panhard rod. It goes from the chassis over here
to the axle.
And its purpose
is the guidance in lateral direction.
So to stop the whole axle moving from side to side.
You have to be strong because more or less the whole axle load in lateral direction guided by this link. So this has to be massive.
And it's the same setup at the back. Where have you got to now in terms of developing the final suspension for Grenadier?
Yeah, so we have a great prototype setting now. We have a real great ground clearance, very high distortion angles on the axle itself. This enables a good traction on every off-road terrain you can think about. And of course we have a real high wheel travel. This enables a good drivability even in empty condition and also with a trailer on it.
There's no electronic control on this at all, it would seem. There are no wires anywhere.
Yeah, so there is completely free of electric components to be robust, to be easy to maintain, also to have easy access to all parts.
I tell you what, after months of only being able to look at computer-generated models of the suspension, it is so cool to finally be able to touch some real parts. But these are prototypes, of course. There's a whole heap of testing and fine-tuning to go. There's a bloke in Scotland, I know, who will be desperate to get his hands on this stuff and to show it a bit of good old-fashioned Highland hospitality.
Hopefully they will get it right. And if they listen to the people that's out there that's working the ground, working the land, and need a good rugged 4x4, I hope they get it right.
I hear you, Billy. Clearly building a rugged 4x4 is a huge challenge, but getting it right is exactly what INEOS are focusing on. That's why they've got the best people working on it, and I have to say, their confidence is impressive. I promised you exclusive access behind closed doors. Well, there you go. You're the only people who've seen that. Well, that's it for episode 2 of Building the Grenadier. Join me next time to find out more about the engineering of this radical new 4x4. Okay, right. For this episode of Building the Grenadier, I had hoped to whisk you off to Germany to explore engine options. But that'll have to wait because the world's changed, of course. We're all in lockdown. So coming up, I catch up remotely with some of INEOS Automotive's senior management team to find out what's going on and how they're handling the coronavirus challenge. Later, Dirk Haarman, the CEO, reveals when we'll get to see the Grenadier for the very first time. But let's start with the man responsible for engineering what we're all so desperate to get our eyes on. So what is your role then as Chief Engineer Exterior? What are you ultimately responsible for?
Everything you see on the outside of the vehicle. So every corner, every radii, every part, every colour, every material, everything.
In terms of the exterior design, kind of where are things at the moment?
The exterior design is signed off. So that gives us time, because after the shape is created, we need to look, engineer, we need to contact suppliers, contact all the departments. So there's always a period after when the stylists have stopped. We call it styling sign-off. So we are pretty much there now.
Paul, the fact that we're zooming, it is obviously because of coronavirus and COVID-19.
Yes.
How has that impacted your team and the design process of the exterior?
As long as you have Wi-Fi, I really don't think in our world today it makes any difference at all, to be honest.
So in principle, coronavirus hasn't had as big an impact as it might have had for maybe a more traditional manufacturer who's already in serial production?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. We are still moving forward at the same pace.
Can you give me any examples of where it's been tricky to be able to do what you need to do from a capability perspective with the vehicle and its functional perspective off-road, but actually still retain some aesthetic?
Two examples. You need an approach angle and you need a departure angle. So every shape that's created on the front of the rear of the vehicle must respect the approach and the departure angle of this vehicle. Otherwise, as you quite rightly said, people will not see this as fit for function. We must have this approach and departure angle.
Thank you very much for giving us that insight. We cannot wait to see it. When the factory's up and running, it'll need feeding with components from suppliers all over the world, ensuring everything is engineered perfectly and delivered on time is a mammoth challenge. Oliver, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for your time. Even though it's part of the new world, isn't it? Because of coronavirus, we're all meeting each other online, but it's great to get some time with you. So one of the fascinating things, Oliver, about this is obviously the fact that INEOS has never built a car before, let alone a highly specialist off-road utility vehicle. Does that make it actually easier to build this vehicle or more challenging?
I would say both. On the one hand, I trained my sales skills quite a lot in the last months, I would say, because what it's all about is we have to explain the business model. The second challenge, I would say, is around recruiting. So what we need is really entrepreneurial mindset and skills. It's not easy to find that in an, I would say, more or less traditional auto industry, especially around the locations where we are. Whereas easier is you can design actually processes, IT landscape, contracts, everything which is around your business processes exactly to the purpose.
What do you see over the next year to 18 months? What are the really big challenges that are still kind of, to conquer from your point of view?
I think one of the biggest challenges is really to get the partners ready for serial production. Now it comes out of actually the digital phase. You have the digital engineering done, but now you have to actually put it in the physical world, and this is ahead of us.
Oliver, listen, thank you very, very much for your time. It's brilliant to catch up. These are very tricky times for any business, for sure, but there's a genuine sense of energy and optimism on this project. Everyone I talk to is really fired up. At every level, it seems that Grenadier is personal. So does that come from the top? Dirk, thank you very much for finding some time to speak to me. I know you're a very busy man.
Mark, absolutely a pleasure to talk to you again. It's always a pleasure to see you.
So how are you coping with lockdown?
Well, lockdown is working as good as it can after 8 to 9 weeks of isolation.
Has it helped the fact that you are a startup and you're a very flexible company at the moment?
I think the key bit here was that we are a team that develops in Germany, Austria. We have a team in the UK, so we are used to work from remote locations and collaborate using modern technology. I think the tools are in place also for our, mainly what we're doing right now, serial development for our engineering partners. We've seen some delays, but overall I think we're coping fine.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge?
Let's say the biggest challenge is, it's definitely plural. And it seems like you're jumping from one challenge to the next. I think the first and most important step was getting the right people on board and that are now driving this. I think that was the biggest challenge. Second, then finding the right partners, because it is quite important to get good supply base, good components that we will use to create the Grenadier at the end of the day. And I think the biggest challenge to come now is really getting the word out there, getting even to the broader mass known what this vehicle is all about.
So what stage are we at now?
We're now moving into serial development where all the key partners are on board. We just came out of winter testing earlier this year and that has progressed. So now we're really preparing our prototype program for this year, which is large scale, where we can validate the car, calibrate everything and get everything work together nicely. Coming out of COVID, coming out of that crisis, we have lost some time here and we need to make it up. We are not jeopardizing the quality, so we need to find ways of testing very hard, very rigorously our product, but we have less time, so we need to find ways of doing it in parallel rather than sequential.
On the wall behind you, the picture behind your right hand is that's the photo that was outside the Grenadier pub. What is that photo on the other side of you?
That's actually a picture of the winter testing.
That is the Grenadier?
This is a Grenadier prototype running in Sweden, yes.
Can you bring it over here so I can look at it?
You won't see much anyway.
Okay, good. Can hardly see it. Oh my God. So you promised a vehicle that would look like it means business. That's looking pretty cool. When will the world get to see photos without snow in them, that you can actually see it?
I think it's a matter of weeks now, so you can look forward to it soon.
So there you have it, right from the top. Next time, right here on Building the Grenadier, you're going to see in detail what it looks like. Welcome to a very special edition of Building the Grenadier. After all the talk, all the speculation and all the planning, INEOS Automotive is finally prepared to let us see the exterior of their all-new 4x4. So, here you go. I bet that's got you talking. Well, this is the man behind what you've just seen. His brief was very clear. Design the ultimate utility 4x4. This is a very big day for Grenadier.
Yeah, it's been a few years of pretty hard work. This is a very exciting day because it's the first time really that everybody can see what we've been busying ourselves with for the last few years.
Revealing the finished look of the car so early in its development, most manufacturers wouldn't dare do that.
I think because we're not really restrained in the way that a big manufacturer would. We don't have to protect an ongoing line of vehicles. You know, the view is that we just need to be really open about it. We'd much rather get the actual car out there, test it. Like to be nice and open. Why wouldn't you be?
The story about a pub in London, the Grenadier, a bunch of blokes having a few beers and coming up with this plan to build the ultimate off-roader. Is that really what happened, or was it a much more conventional brief to use ago?
It pretty much was exactly that. It seemed that the sort of last of the proper utility vehicles were about to stop. There was a character about them that we all kind of felt we were going to miss, and you know, you look around and there was nothing that was really very appealing, and you know, Jim being Jim, let's do something about it. And as we basically worked out what it was about the character of these older vehicles, what was the DNA that gave it that character, and as we understood more, you start to see why these vehicles start to look in the way that they do. You know, we didn't sort of set out to make it look like anything else. It was always sort of engineering led. Function always wins.
Where did your influences come from in the way you creatively thought about the design?
You know, right at the beginning, I remember saying, we've got to design something super practical, really well built. If we can think of it in these terms now, all the rest of it gets kind of built onto there. If you look at any of the older, you know, the Pajeros or the Nissan Patrols, the old Defenders, there's a real kind of easy to understand sort of visual on them. You can see how it goes together. There's no sort of clever disguising of A and B pillars, and it's just very logical. You can see that's a structural beam, that's where something fits. And I think that makes it a very comfortable thing to live with.
So take me through in headline terms the design we've just seen, the exterior.
It's not a very complicated vehicle. You know, it has got that sort of boxy design, and that's really a result of a wheel in each corner, a ladder frame, then an engine of a certain size which needs a certain number of radiators and cooling and space for crashing, and obviously all the sort of departure angles and the entry angles and that sort of stuff which we've tried really, really hard to respect. You have a round headlight, which again is about the sort of simplest form of a headlight that you can get. It's almost like there's a tube that runs through, and then there's a rear light which is also round as well. We've got things like this sort of built-in utility rail and things that are kind of there. It's a canvas for people to go and build upon. I kind of see it, here's a vehicle that is massively capable off-road, but it's kind of up to you to sort of go and make it your own. Down to the rear doors, that we've got a split door, we've got a really thin one that means you don't have to open the big heavy door with a wheel on it. You can just open the little door, put your tool bag in there, close the door, and off you get. It's not a difficult, complicated route.
The look is kind of interesting though, isn't it? Because clearly it has to be functional. It's got to get the job done. It's got to work, particularly for those people who are going to work it.
That's often engineer-led. So like the wheel arches, for example, you just mentioned, that wasn't anything to do with styling. That was going off with the engineers and driving this thing as on the most extreme off-road that they can. What's the limit? How much space do we need for these wheel arches? That's what we went with. Then that sets up quite interesting sort of design parameters there. So saying, well, we can't touch that because that's starting to compromise the performance.
It's function every time, but actually you've still got to sell it. It's still got to look good. Because
it's been sort of engineering led, it doesn't mean it has to be ugly. I think again in the same way that you don't have to build it badly because it's a working vehicle. We can still make it look good and interesting and really consider every square millimetre of it. I'm sure it will continue to develop, and also there's the sort of pickup version as well. It's going to be following hot on the heels, I think.
Oh, so hang on. So I've always had it in my head that the station wagon is going to be the vehicle that is the Grenadier.
Yeah.
There's been lots of discussion about, well, yeah, but hang on, I want a tipper and I want a pickup truck and I want this and I want that. Is that already you're thinking about that now?
Yeah, certainly. And certainly the sort of double cab pickup is something that we've been working on in parallel. But yeah, certainly that's the mindset, is to make it a proper family vehicle.
Because as a working tool, that is so important to end user.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the whole spirit of this sort of vehicle, is that there's not a single use for it, and people do like to modify and adapt and build onto existing vehicles. And so that's always been in the back of our minds.
I know from personal experience that vehicles that I love very much, that are utility vehicles, have not been comfortable. I enjoy it, but I have to really kind of put up with some suffering to get that enjoyment. And why should that be the case?
Well, I think that was a lot of the thought, was that you don't have to make it badly, you don't have to suffer just because you're using your vehicle to go to work in. You can be comfortable, you can be dry and warm. Obviously you're going to work with it, but if you are using it as a sort of recreation vehicle, it's still engaging and it's fun, but it's also comfortable, and that was a really big driver, I think.
Are there elements of what we're looking at now that for you are kind of almost eureka moments?
So much work went into that bonnet, and there's a really good moment on that actually, where they're saying actually we need an extra 2 centimetres for the pedestrian impact, and it's all right. Absolutely, everyone's checked that we can't get the engine any lower. No, it can't be any. So can we see the engine? There's a big plastic cover on the top of it, and I said, well, do we need the plastic cover? No, that's just how the engine comes. Okay, well, if we take that off, oh no, it's fine then.
You can't have known when you started this how it was going to turn out. Is it kind of how you thought it would turn out?
I think probably about a year ago, I thought, yeah, it feels really right now, and that's. Yeah, I got very comfortable with that, and then it's just sort of got better and better. Every time I go into the studio now and see it, I'm really comfortable with it.
We've seen the clay. There's some more work to be done on that. So what happens now then?
I mean, we're pretty happy with most of it. So as I say, there's a few details that need to be resolved yet. But also we've obviously got to do our testing, which we want to do in sort of plain sight, because we're partly because we're all really excited about it. I don't see any problem in kind of doing that openly and welcoming feedback and comments, and it'd be great to get people to actually test it and drive it, so we can make a truly brilliant vehicle in the end.
I hope that's given you a real sense of what the Grenadier is going to look like and why. And yes, I know what you're thinking. You want to see more, don't you? We'll take a look at this. In the last episode, you got to see what the Grenadier will eventually look like. Well, now's your chance to hear it and to see it undergoing some of its preliminary testing. Yes, I'm back in Austria to catch up with the engineers responsible for developing and testing the Grenadier's powertrain. And that is actually a lot steeper than it looks. Early prototype Grenadiers called 2As are being used to specially calibrate petrol and diesel variants of the same BMW 3-litre 6-cylinder engine. The tuning and testing programme is being led by engineer George Fuchs. That's cool. It sounds really smooth though.
Yeah.
So the 2 engine options are going to be what, just to clarify?
So here you can see the diesel version, and before on the test track you have seen the petrol version. Both are 3-litre versions with 6 straight cylinders.
Why take an existing engine that's being used for a different purpose off the shelf and modify it, rather than just go, let's build a brand new engine from scratch?
We know we can count on the BMW one. We fulfill all emission standards on every market. We know we can adapt this engine for the use of the Grenadier project. The most important thing is to have a high amount of torque at low engine revs. We need a robust engine, and we need an engine we can count on, because we need to be flexible and have a high amount of torque and power, be able to bring up the vehicle, also with a trailer, for example, up the hill.
How hard is it retuning, recalibrating either a diesel or petrol version of this to make it the right engine for Grenadier?
We need 2 to 3 years of calibration activities. So we have several loops, winter testing, several loops in hot climate testing, emission testing and so on.
So in terms of calibration then, and what you can change, what are you actually fiddling with and changing when you're calibrating?
It's a mix of old components which are relevant for the engine, the air intake system, then you have cooling temperature, you have fuel supply, you have the exhaust system. Here you can see in front, these are approximately 12 pressure sensors which are measuring the pressure in the fuel supply, in the cooling system and so on.
Where's the data capturing equipment?
In the back of the vehicle.
All right, okay. Now it's looking complicated. So what are all these boxes?
So on the left side, in green color, you can see all the temperature measurement points, and then to the right, the flow rate sensors and the pressure sensors.
And so then all that lot then just hooks up to one laptop?
Then we check it after every test.
So you guys have already done extensive testing, 18 months or so. How much more have you got to do?
So approximately 1 year is left. And in total we will travel 1.8 million kilometers.
That's a lot of testing.
Yeah.
INEOS Automotive is working with off-road engineering giant Magna to develop not only the Grenadier's engine options but also its heavy-duty transmission. Its facilities here in Austria are world-renowned. The gearbox programme is being led by INEOS engineer Job Zwollo. I'm keen to find out firsthand how things are going, and there's a burning question that needs a straight answer. Will there be a manual option?
No.
Why not?
We've reviewed all the options and we believe that the Auto is the best option. It offers the full suite of functionality for the experienced drivers but also for the inexperienced drivers. These are both a ZF8HP, 8-speed automatic transmission with torque converter, fully electronic control, best in class, definitely.
And in terms of the features in it that make it better for off-road use, for the kind of customers who are going to end up driving these vehicles?
Oh, definitely. It has a torque converter which prevents stall, increases torque. There's a manual mode for the enthusiasts to select their gear and keep that gear, or keep it in drive for the inexperienced drivers.
So the transfer case, this has been a big part of the powertrain development for Grenadier, hasn't it?
Yes, it's massive. We've developed a transfer case from a blank sheet of paper.
Why was that so important for this project?
This is the part that makes this car a 4x4. If you don't have the transfer case right, then your off-road performance will be not as good as it should be. We are targeting to be best in class, so the transfer case needs to be that too.
So what essentially is unique about the transfer case?
The fact that it's permanent 4x4. There's not many manufacturers doing that. Most of them choose to go for a permanent rear-wheel drive and then have the user select the 4x4. We've deliberately decided not to do so. We want to offer our customers this experience and understand also you're driving on the road, you decide to make a detour through the country or whatever, the countryside. There's no complex switches and buttons to be used, or you need to stop to put it in 4x4. You just take the corner and you've got drive on all 4 wheels.
In terms of operation though, this is a manual selection,
yes.
High and low range.
Correct, so it's manually high and low range and manually diff lock. That was a deliberate decision again. The manual shifting system is it's rugged, it's durable, and it's also very well serviceable in the field.
Where are you with the current development?
We're building 100+ full vehicle prototypes. So we've moved from component testing into system testing, and now we're going to do full vehicle testing. So for the next coming year and more, there's going to be a whole bunch of cars running around the whole world. That means cars doing calibration on every aspect of the car. Transmission, engine, brakes, ESP, ABS, everything. Durability runs, hot climate, cold climate. We're going to see America, we're going to see Africa, we're going to see New Zealand this year. We're going to see Australia, everywhere.
How does that feel for the engineering team at INEOS?
It's Christmas. It is, because you've been working on virtual components on a computer screen for every engineer. That's a magic moment. But also a new phase in the program, because now you're going to put these components to their pace. It's going to be an exciting period.
So, to recap, the Grenadier will launch with diesel and petrol options of the same proven 3-litre straight-six engine, hooked up to variants of a best-in-class 8-speed auto gearbox with driver override. The transfer case, being developed from scratch, promises full manual control.
That's it for now. See you next time.